the masthead of their newspaper, Will Self back on drugs again, with reference to an article that the find that appeared inside the paper. It was these same people who then turned around to me, and with no sympathy, no questions about what sort of situation I was in, no acknowledgement of what kind of pressures I might have been on, summarily faced me with a very, very, very difficult political position, and then summarily fired me.
Well, it may be, I feel protective of Will. It's ridiculous to say that as someone twice one's height. But I think all his friends feel that way about him. My worry is that, when I published my first novel, that was it. You just handed it in, you got reviewed, and that was it. All this collateral stuff that has sprung up all around us in the last 10 or 15 years means that Will never had a time of quiet. And he's become, very well known very quickly. But I think he has a size of personality that will carry him through there. But, this isn't a climate for shrinking violets, and nor is he one.
Besides your novels, you do an awful lot of journalism. You've been a restaurant reviewer, you've got a column in the Times now, you do television. So the idea of celebrity, maybe not notoriety, is being embraced, isn't it?
I think there's certainly part of me that has been interested in that. There's no question about it, and I think I'm very interested.
What is the interest, then, do you think?
I think that the drive towards celebrity or notoriety is, particularly for people who work through a medium, is often a drive. Well, you think it'll gain you love and understanding, but in fact it doesn't. I really think that there's a quite childish drive there behind it. It's as simple as the wealthy boy buying hamburgers and sweets for the kids at school, in that sense.
Do you think that all this is resulting in a rather formalized result of you being two people? I mean, we're all many people, so let's not go into that. But as is formally seen, there's the Will Self who is on television, the bad boy, the drugs, the former drugs, whatever it is, the being chased off aeroplanes or being chased out of newspapers. And then there's the Will Self that most of your friends know, in many ways very straightforward, thoughtful, but quite a lot different.
Well, I mean, one wouldn't... In some senses, it could be seen as very useful to build up that kind of dichotomy, and quite useful to operate from behind a somewhat bowdlerized version of oneself, given that one was in that position to begin with. And in some senses, I would say I've been guilty of still slightly encouraging that dichotomy because it's useful for me. I'm actually a very private person. I believe it's dishonorable for people to talk about their contemporary relationships in any depth at all. In fact, not at all. I'm very protective of my family. And I don't, it's sort of bizarrely been quite useful for me to have this odd golem wandering around that people think is me. Evolution's been good to me, Harry.
You keep returning to unexpected perspectives. In fact, there's one of your stories is called Scale.
It's as basic as Alice in Wonderland. The first thing you get is an alteration in scale when you grow up. And, a rediscovery of a childlike perspective is also an obsession with the miniature or with the large. I mean, again, it's trying to uncork the meaning of something by using scale as a primary means of distortion, indeed much as Swift did in Gulliver.
Great Apes is, you mentioned Swift, seems to me to be clearly a Swiftian work. What took you towards this idea?
Great Apes, like a lot of my fictions, is a fiction about extreme transmogrification, extreme change. It's about a moderately successful artist who goes to sleep one night after an evening of extreme debauchery and wakes up in the morning to discover that everybody in the world has turned into a chimpanzee except for him.
Sarah sat at the bar of the Sea-Link Club being propositioned by men. Some men propositioned her with their eyes, some with their mouths, some with their hair. Some men propositioned her with nuance, exquisite subtlety. Others propositioned her with chutzpah, their suit as obvious as a schlong slammed down on a zinc counter. Some men's propositioning was so slight as to be peripheral, a seductive play of the minor parts. Other men's propositioning was a Bayreuth production, garishly depicting their taste, their intellect, their status. The men were like apes, she thought, attempting to impress her in a display of mock potency.
I think satire traditionally takes a perspective from outside of a society in order to deconstruct what that society is about. You, as it were, looking at social forms we're familiar with in anthropological terms. But what I wanted to do with Great Apes was to write an even more profound satire of humanity, to look at humanity through the lens of ethology, to regard humans as if they were just another primate species, which is why I fixed on the idea of a society in which chimpanzees were evolutionarily successful. And as long as the influence of neo-Darwinianism and social Darwinism becomes more prevalent, I think there's a danger that humans will start to look at themselves as being just another primate species in that way.
A group of the younger conceptual artists who are currently dominating the scene in London were among the first to arrive. Simon knew them all, of course, and found them more than a little affected, if not absurd. They were hanging about the place, all either dressed to the nines or looking like dossers, ostentatiously not grooming one another. This, like chimp, we don't groom act was constantly being undercut by the nervous and repetitive presenting they all indulged in when someone important swung by. For all their vaunted membership of the avant-garde, whatever that was, they were just like everybody else, addicted to the pecking order and the superior arse lick.
The novel begins in a recognisable London, which I should imagine is quite near a London you know very well and inhabit very well. Openings at art galleries and overindulgence in one thing and another, and a club which bears a passing resemblance to one or two clubs in Soho. It seems to me you're enjoying yourself very much writing about that particular human world, and with its overtones of apishness right the way through. Do you like that sort of world?
Well, at a personal level, I think I have a bit of a hint of the boulevardier in me, yes.
What did it enable you to do that you wanted to do as a satirist, Will?
Largely swing through trees and, you know, eat bananas without having to take the skin off and have a lot of public copulation.
Why do you object? Why did you want to take it on?
I think like a lot of people that bother to think about these things, of course there are the obvious worries about forms of social Darwinism, that they can get linked up to fascistic thinking of all forms.
To forms of eugenic control.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think people perhaps misunderstand the notion. I think a modern satire cannot be necessarily a satire with even a hidden moral message, but rather a modern satire has to have the message "think for yourself" lying beneath it. So I never really wanted to provide solutions to questions of should we be granting some form of limited human rights to anthropoid apes, as some modern primatological thinkers suggest. Should we be reining back significantly on our capacity to perform these eugenic things? Should we be questioning our increasing desire to see social organization in terms of the organization of other animals? Should we be resisting those sorts of things? It wasn't so much presenting answers to these questions as saying these are really vital issues that we really should be thinking about, and this is a way into thinking about them. And as ever with me, a kind of anger at the terms in which they were being discussed.
What do you think there is? Do you think that the world, as we receive it at the moment through television, newspapers and so on, there are certain people who think it's almost beyond satire, description will do?
Yes, I mean, the sense, I think it's, Hunter Thompson says reality itself has become too twisted, and J.G. Ballard, who I regard as a great mentor, has said